Welcome everyone to the October round of Faculty Research Lightning Talks hosted by the Center of Research and Creative Activity. Thank you to everyone for attending today and to all of you who have contributed to our past events as well. Today we have 5 presenters who will be discussing this month's topic, cybersecurity and preventative measures. I will introduce each speaker before their presentation, and then each presentation will be followed by 1 to 2 questions from the audience. After each presenter has finished speaking, please feel free to unmute yourselves and ask your question. After all 5 presenters have finished, we will open up breakout rooms so that you can visit with each presenter of your choice and discuss any insights or questions you may have. So today we will be hearing from our presenters. We'll have our questions and answers, and then the breakout rooms will be named for each presenter. That way you know which breakout room you're jumping into. So with that, we will begin with our first presenter, Dr. Mahesh Boodraj. Dr. Mahesh Boodraj is an assistant professor of information technology management in the College of Business and Economics at Boise State University. Mahesh's research focuses on IT project management, cybersecurity, and software development. He has published several articles in peer-reviewed outlets, such as the Journal of the Association for Information Systems and the Database for Advances in Information Systems. Mahesh holds a PhD in Computer Information Systems from Georgia State University and is a distinguished member of the Association for Information Systems. He is also a certified information systems security professional and project management professional. Before joining academia, he spent 12 years in various managerial and technical roles at the Mona School of Business and Management and at IBM. Today, he'll be talking to us about critical skills for managing cybersecurity projects. Mahesh, the floor is yours.
Thank you, Catherine, for that wonderful introduction and for inviting me to be a part of this lightning talk with so many distinguished colleagues. It's really a pleasure to be here. Yesterday, I took a look at cyberseek.org just to get a sense of how many cybersecurity jobs there are in the United States. And as of yesterday, there were 4,000 open cybersecurity jobs right here in Idaho, and more than 572,000 open cybersecurity jobs nationally. So what this means is that a large number of cybersecurity jobs are remaining unfilled or are being filled with younger or less experienced professionals. These same professionals will be asked to be a part of and potentially lead these initiatives before they're fully ready to do so. This, of course, reduces the chances that they'll be able to successfully deliver these projects and obtain the required benefits for the firm. It's therefore important for organizations to help their teams, their cybersecurity professionals, to quickly develop the critical skills that they need to successfully manage cybersecurity projects. Now, this seems simple enough until you realize we don't quite know what these skills are or should be. That realization led me to apply for a summer research grant from the College of Business and Economics, where I work, earlier this year, and I was awarded with one of these grants thanks to Associate Dean Ryan Baxter and the entire Kobe Dean's office. So I really appreciate them supporting me and my work. Since beginning this research project, I've explored several sources of data. First, I took a look at online job boards, and what I'm seeing is that there are increasingly more posts for cybersecurity project managers or information security project managers, as opposed to the traditional IT project management role that we're all familiar with. I should say this role did not exist. These cybersecurity project management roles did not exist at the beginning of my career 20 years ago. And so it's really an emerging field. And so I want to learn more about it. Second, I did a review of the academic literature. And what I found was that there was only a handful of studies focused on managing cybersecurity projects, 7 to be exact, and most of those were published within the last 5 years, which tells me that it's an emerging area with increasing interest. Third, I started interviewing practitioners informally, just starting conversations with them, trying to understand the challenges they're having and their own perspectives. And so during Boise State's Cyber Career Day earlier this month, I spoke with several senior cybersecurity project managers who offered insight into their cybersecurity teams and indicated an interest in working with me on this research project. So this initial work led me to ask another question. how are cybersecurity project managers different from traditional IT project managers? In other words, what's unique about this role? What unique skills do cybersecurity project managers need to be successful? And the answer to this question is important for several stakeholder groups. For example, in academia, professors like myself, I see my colleague Dan Rush here, who teach courses on project management and information security. We can use the findings from this research to prepare interested students for a career in cybersecurity project management. And this is particularly applicable to students in our master's program, for example, our Masters of Cybersecurity, which with the management emphasis, so that these students can be prepared when they graduate to take on these roles. In industry, practitioners can use the findings from this research to improve their cybersecurity project management skills or prepare for a career in cybersecurity project management. And job seekers can use what we find to tailor their resumes to be more attractive for these roles if they're interested in pursuing them. And finally, employers who are hiring can use this list of skills to really create job posts and to hire the right people. And if they're retooling people they've already hired, they can address any gaps that they see. Yesterday, I attended a full-day cybersecurity conference here in Idaho. And my key takeaways were that while all organizations are at risk for some cyber attack, state and local government and educational institutions like Boise State, termed SLED, are attractive targets for hackers because of the critical services that we provide to citizens and the intellectual property that we create and store. As warfare continues to move from the physical world to the digital world, we'll need significantly more cybersecurity professionals with increasing capabilities. Now, I left the conference energized and even more motivated to advance my research on cybersecurity project management, and I hope that all of you will leave here today similarly energized and motivated to take the next step in your cybersecurity journey. I look forward to telling you more about my research in the Q&A and breakout rooms. Thank you. Over to you, Catherine.
Thank you so much, Mahesh. That's really interesting. We will have a few minutes now if anybody has any questions they'd like to ask.
Hi, Catherine. This is Kim Tabarini.
Hi.
Hi. Mahesh, thank you. That actually is really interesting. My husband actually works in the IT field, so I hear about some of the cybersecurity issues that St. Luke's deals with. But I'm wondering, when you were looking at information, if you also noticed any salary data related to that and what the field is driving to in perspective to the salaries, like people that want to go into that field.
Yeah, excellent question. So I have a rough idea of IT project management and project management salaries in general. And so typically an experienced project manager could earn about $120,000 a year. And if you have certifications, that gives you an extra $15,000 pay bump. So just being a project manager is a lucrative profession to be in. It's part of why I got into it as well, and why I enjoy it so much. As for cybersecurity project managers, whether they make more or less, I haven't done that analysis yet, but it's certainly something I'm going to look into as I delve a bit deeper into the job post data. So thank you for that question, Kimberly.
I'll jump in with a question really quick. What made you interested in researching this? Like, what was the kind of sparking point for that?
I'll give you the short answer because there's really a long story behind this, but and I have it here just in case. I needed it, so thank you for asking. There's a famous quote by Steve Jobs, and he said, the reason that Apple is able to create products like the iPad is because we've always tried to be at the intersection of technology and the liberal arts. And to those of us who followed Steve Jobs and Apple and their story, really find it interesting. And one of the examples he shared was that the fonts on Apple products are so beautiful because he happened to have dropped into a calligraphy class while he was in college. And that story stuck with me. And recently I was looking back at my 20-year career in IT, and there have been two common themes. When I worked at IBM, when I worked as head of IT for a business school, I've always been involved in project management and cybersecurity in one form or the other. And I've held these two certifications for a while, and other related certifications. And now in the College of Business and Economics where I'm at, I teach project management and cybersecurity. And so, I reflected on this recently and thought, well, I have two very different skill sets. On the one end, it's management, on the other end, it's very technical with cybersecurity. How interesting would it be to look at any potential overlap between these two fields and see whether there's research there, whether there's projects there that I can maybe add a unique perspective to as somebody with experience in these two very distinct areas. And so that led me to start pursuing this common area overlap in cybersecurity project management, or just managing cybersecurity projects. Thanks for that question, Catherine.
Awesome. Thank you so much. All right. With that, thank you so much, Dr. Boodraj. We'll go ahead and move on to our next speaker, Dr. Marion Scheepers. Dr. Marion Scheepers is a distinguished professor in the Department of Mathematics at Boise State University. He received his PhD in mathematics at the University of Kansas in game theory. He has research strengths in areas including mathematical logic, game theory, and their interplay with cryptography, cryptanalysis, and security. He'll be talking to us today about security challenges in machine learning. Dr. Scheepers, it is all yours.
Thank you, Catherine, for that introduction, and thank you, everybody, for being here. I'm not nearly as good a speaker as Mahesh, but I'll try to keep you engaged. So over the millennia, this is part of the picture here. Over the millennia, we learned some of the basic laws for several natural phenomena, and we exploited these to our advantage to enhance the quality of life and mitigate challenges. So here on the picture on the left, for example, I have the periodic table, the universal genetic code, gravitation, electromagnetism, fundamental particles, and so forth. Now, it took us millennia to learn about these things. Nowadays, we're faced with significant, even sometimes extinction-level challenges that require urgent attention and rapid learning at rates beyond our historical capacity. And artificial intelligence through machine learning can come to the rescue. For machine learning to be relevant and effective, several constraints have to be managed and optimized, and one of those is security. In short, here's a big picture description of the machine learning paradigm, and this is this picture in the bottom right with the three little devils on it. So execution of machine learning algorithms require input samples from some database, and then the machine learning algorithm take those samples and maybe asking questions from an oracle and get some responses back, and learn from this information, and then would be outputting a sample, or shall we say a model of the phenomenon that drives the examples that were input. Think of it as, for example, you're inputting positions of planets at different times and so forth, and the output is going to be the law of gravitation, hopefully, or an approximation of it. Now, in the learning process, there's this communication channel between the learning algorithm and the examples that it is fed, and there's a communication channel between the oracle and the learning algorithm. And of course, there's this database from which the samples are drawn. And each of those gives an opportunity to adversary with negative intentions to actually interfere with what the output will be from this learning algorithm. So, for example, the data from which learning samples are drawn may be confidential data, and so we wanted to preserve that confidentiality when the samples are drawn from the data and passed to the learning algorithm. Another possibility is that the samples passing through the communication channel may actually be interfered with by the adversary, and the adversary may throw in some bad examples, and the machine learning algorithm will now use also those bad samples to try to construct this model of the phenomenon that we're trying to learn. Another place where the adversary could interfere is, for example, between the oracle and the learning algorithm. The adversary could play a man-in-the-middle attack, where the learning algorithm sends a request to the oracle, but the man-in-the-middle intercepts it, sends it onto the oracle, gets the oracle's response back, changes it, and sends it back to the learning algorithm. So all of these items affect what the output is going to be. And there are numerous other challenges that can be considered. And now countermeasures are needed. And this is where cryptography and cryptanalysis enters the stage and comes to the rescue, hopefully, with what we call CIA enforcement, where C stands for confidentiality, I for integrity, and A for authentication. Now, these mitigations that cryptography would provide actually would impact the energy memory resources, and so careful considerations are needed when you decide what crypto systems and so forth to use. There's an intimate relationship between machine learning and cryptography. It was pointed out more than 40 years ago, and it turns out that the development of that relationship is actually quite lagging in advances. The main challenge that motivates my research is to construct a machine learning algorithm for which undermining the accuracy of the output by an adversary would require that the adversary actually first solve a cryptographically hard task. And I know this is kind of big picture talk instead of details, but I will stop there and take questions if there are any.
Awesome. Thank you so much, Marion. Does anyone have any questions? Please feel free to unmute yourself and ask away.
I have a question, Marion.
Yes.
So this morning in my information security class, we started talking about encryption and cryptography. And one of my students asked, how much math do you need to know to get involved in learning about, encryption and cryptography? As a math expert, what would your answer to that question be? I didn't have a good one.
So I think learning how the cryptographic algorithm works and so forth in and of itself does not require that math, but when it much math. But when it comes to actually working on whether the thing is secure, the cryptanalysis part of it, that requires mathematics to a large extent. Yeah, you need quite a bit of math to, and of course you need creativity. You have to think like the adversary. But the cryptanalytic part of it, I think, is where the deep dive into mathematics is needed.
Thank you for that answer. And I just got a private message from the student. So he's on this call and he appreciates your answer.
Okay, great. If there's interest among the students, we have several crypto classes also that are offered where there's cryptography and cryptanalysis. The 300 level classes don't require that much mathematics, but the 400, 500, they do.
What's your definition? Sorry, what's your definition of not that much mathematics?
Good question. Well, so in a typical, shall we say, mathematics course, people learn not only mathematical information, but also the mathematical method, which has to do with providing proofs, etc., that statements that are given, mathematical statements that are given, also are true. When we leave out that part of it, where it's only mathematical information that's being learned and you use it to do mathematical computations, shall we say, in that case, we would call it not that much math. You can have machines help you work on it. I don't know if that answers the question. There are probably other mathematicians on the call, so please correct me if you think differently about it. The big place where students have trouble is when it comes to having to give proofs.
If I could jump in, I don't know whether it's a lot of math if I say no calculus required. 1 to 3, no calc 1, 2, or 3. More critical thinking rather than and math that it's very students a math that unfortunately students don't see much in many math classes, but it's very easy and very to learn, and kind of it's close to, it's very intuitive.
That's the word.
Some of us still have post-calculus trauma.
The most important thing is critical mind and good intuition. The other stuff can be learned.
Wonderful. Thank you so much, everyone, for your questions. I'm sorry we have to cut it short, but please write them down so that you can go talk with Dr. Scheepers and when we have our breakout rooms. Awesome. Thank you so much. And we're going to go ahead and move on to our next presenter, Dr. Jaclyn Kettler. Dr. Jaclyn Kettler is an associate professor of political science in the School of Public Service at Boise State University. She is also the faculty director of the New Leadership Idaho program and an affiliated faculty member with the Idaho Election Cybersecurity Center. She earned her PhD in political science at Rice University and her BA in political science and international studies at Baker University. Her research focuses on American politics with an emphasis on state politics, elections, campaign finance, political parties and interest groups, and women in politics. She has published research in American Politics Research, Election Law Journal, Party Policies, Political Research Quarterly, State Politics and Policy Quarterly, and other outlets. She is also a co-host of the Big Tent radio show on Radio Boise. She's going to be talking to us today about increasing confidence in elections through incident tracking. Dr. Kettler, the floor is yours.
Awesome. Thank you so much. And thank you everyone for being here. It's been really great to hear from everyone else and their research. Today, I'm going to talk about election security. And I think there's a slide with a graph on it. Thank you. Perfect.
Sorry.
No worries. And why would we care about cybersecurity of elections? Well, obviously we want elections to be administered correctly. We want votes to be accurately counted, the winner accurately identified. But there's also a growing proportion of the population that are not confident in our elections. And when there's that lack of confidence that their vote is being accurately counted is concerning. And we've surveyed Idahoans, and Idahoans report a pretty high confidence in Idaho elections. But of course, we vote on paper ballots here, so that probably helps reduce, ensure some of that more confidence. But for the Idahoans that are concerned about the security, it's voting machines that they identify. And we do use voting machines in some counties to tabulate votes, even though we vote on paper. And across the country, this is where a lot of people have concerns, is about the security of our election systems, particularly voting machines. And so how can we help address these concerns and ensure the security of our elections and increase the confidence in them? And that's something the Idaho Election Cybersecurity Center is working on. There's a variety of projects that we've all been working on different elements of this topic. But the project I've been involved in is looking at identifying, reporting, and tracking election incidents. And this team includes computer science faculty and students, Idaho Secretary of State office officials, and myself, a political scientist. So we're working together to try to better understand the types of issues that local election officials face, and then how can we efficiently address them. I want to emphasize this is happening at the state and local level because elections are run at the state and local level, which means we have 50 different election systems in our country. So there's a lot of variation and a lot of systems to try to protect. As Mahesh mentioned, there's a lot of vulnerabilities in our state and local government systems and websites and things like that. So there are some concerns, and we have had state and local governments struggle with ransomware, hacking, other issues. So we want to ensure an efficient response if there is an issue, but also protect the integrity and improve confidence in our elections. Election incidents can be a variety of things. It may be things like cybersecurity threats or issues. It may also be an issue with the voting machine or a lack of supplies. But any of these incidents can disrupt and delay the process. And if people have to wait a long time to vote, that may increase their concerns about their vote being counted or the integrity of the election. So we want to help local election officials more efficiently manage and respond to these incidents. Our team started out with a survey of local election officials in Idaho and Colorado so that we can kind of understand more broadly the issues that local officials are facing. And after collecting that information, that also includes information on how much time responding to different incidents take, we are now working on developing a tool that will be a web-based tool that precinct workers can use to report an incident when it happens, and then also follow up on how long it took to resolve it, if it was resolved. If it's something like a cybersecurity threat or issue, that would be flagged and immediately, sent to higher levels, where a team, for example, within the Secretary of State's office could help respond to that. So the hope is this tool will help more efficient reporting and response to incidents when they happen on election day, helping voting helping reduce the delays in voting, and hopefully help people be more confident that their vote is being accurately counted. It's been great to work on an interdisciplinary project like this because we're bringing together our different areas of substantive knowledge and methodological skills to address this real concern that we have in our country about protecting elections and ensuring that Americans are confident in election outcomes. I look forward to your questions. Thank you.
Thank you so much. That was really interesting, especially with elections coming up and whatnot in the next couple of weeks. All right, if anybody has any questions for Dr. Kettler, please feel free to unmute your mic now.
Thank you, Dr. Kettler. That was really interesting. I'm curious how the tool will work. Will it be at each location, and how real time does it operate?
Great question. Thank you. So this would be, it's similar to an IT incident tracking program. So for at Boise State, if we go to OIT and put in I can't log into my email, right? And then it's going to get flagged, it's going to be categorized and sent to the appropriate people. This is really the inspiration for the tool we're developing as well. So it works similarly to that. And it's at the precinct level. It'll be on a tablet, and it'll just be in the web browser, and the precinct worker can just go in and really quickly and easily submit the incident like what we would submit when we have an issue to OIT. And then they'll kind of automatically categorize as a level, who needs to be responding to this. And then on the other side, there'll be a team that'll be monitoring these incidents, intervening when needed. The other benefit of this tool is that we can have a better accounting of the incidents that come up on elections, on election day. And so in the future, we can use that to help with election administration and prepare for elections to run a bit better, what issues might be faced. Does that help answer your question a little bit there, Caitlin?
Yes, it does. I guess to follow up, I'm curious, what range of incidents are there? And just curious how a election poll person knows when to use this tool and not use this tool.
Yeah, great question. Our goal is that any incident would be reported, even if it's really minor, even if it's just a slight hiccup in someone not knowing their polling location or something. And so anything would be logged, and that will just help us better understand that. Because when we've surveyed local election officials, they're reflecting back on the previous election. We're human, we can forget things and stuff like that. So any incident would be reported, whether it's like voter registration issues or a machine error, ballot issues like not enough ballots, so supply issues. There are also sometimes, like, for example, the power goes out. So that might actually, like, so there's some of these issues that isn't necessarily that the team right there at the precinct can resolve, but it needs to be kind of a broader team responding to it. So really our goal is for any incident to be reported. That's why it's really important to make the tool easy to use, and why we're doing a lot of work kind of on the front end before just developing it, so that when we go into testing the tool, we're already we know the types of incidents that might be coming up, but we're sure to encounter new ones. Our Secretary of State former official that works with us, Chad, talks about one time a precinct had an issue with turkeys, like wild turkeys in front of the precinct, and were really aggressive. And so like, that's not an issue that most precincts are going to deal with, but it's Idaho, so sometimes you have to deal with wildlife. So, there's some of those types of things. More likely, a lot of them is going to be like supply issues or a machine stops working, something like that.
I have a question on the scope again. Thank you for that question. So is it mostly functional and cyber on the scope? One of the candidates for SOS this last election cycle was saying that this particular candidate believed that Canadians had come down to vote in our elections. So I'd like to add that to the scope question. So anyway, that's all I will say about that individual. But there were fears among the people as far as confidence. There's a lot of rumor mongering that happens, and I see it all firsthand. So yeah.
I think that's a great point, and something I meant to mention is sometimes there's narratives that form that may not be accurate. And one thing this will help us do is to have like that data, right? We can be transparent. Well, here are the issues that we are here's the issues that came up, and we didn't really have an issue with, for example, too many people from outside the country trying to vote. That's another thing that we'd hope that we can actually use the data to combat false narratives or information about the election.
Awesome. Thank you so much, Dr. Kettler. I'm so sorry we have to cut the question short, but again, please write down your question, and then when we have our breakout rooms, you can ask them then. Awesome. So thank you again, Dr. Kettler, and we're going to go ahead and move on to our next speaker, Dr. Kurtis Cantley. Dr. Kurtis Cantley leads the Electronic and Neuromorphic Devices and Systems Lab at Boise State University, investigating the unique properties and capabilities of spiking neuromorphic architectures through simulation, fabrication, and advanced electrical characterization. Dr. Cantley received his bachelor's degree from Washington State University in 2005, his master's degree from Purdue University in 2007, and his PhD from the University of Texas at Dallas in 2011, all in electrical engineering. Following postdoctoral research at UT Dallas, he joined Boise State University in 2013, earning the rank of associate professor in 2019. Dr. Cantley has received Young Investigator Awards from the Air Force Office of Scientific Research in 2014 and the Defense Threat Reduction Agency in 2017, as well as the NSF Career Award in 2018. He'll talk to us today about neuromorphic systems for power grid cyber resilience. Dr. Cantley, the floor is yours.
Hey, Catherine. Hi, everyone. I didn't realize the bio was going to be read. Otherwise, I would have cut it a lot shorter. That was quite a mouthful. Appreciate it. Hopefully, y'all can hear me okay. I'm going to talk today about my research project through the U.S. Department of Energy in collaboration, lab partnership with Idaho National Lab about using neuromorphic computing systems for hopefully making the power grid more resilient. So first thing to start with is talking a little bit about how modern day computers work, which is that you have a central processing unit and a memory, and those things are usually kept separate. That's called a von Neumann architecture. And so you have these inputs that are ones and zeros, they're binary data zipping through this set of logic gates, and every so often those logic gates have to fetch a command from memory. And so there's this fetch and execute sort of cycle that happens within the modern day computer, and that fetch and execute cycle has latency. So it takes some time for that to occur. And even though our computers are operating at gigahertz speeds, that slows things down when there's just ones and zeros, and they have to go back and forth and this way and that way. So what I like to do is contrast that with the abilities of the human brain, which if you look at how the brain operates, it actually uses neuron cells, and it uses voltage pulses to communicate between those neuron cells. So it's actually basically electrical as well. But the interesting thing about the brain is it's very much asynchronous, so there's no clock, and it's very slow. Where that processor computer is running at gigahertz, our brain usually operates at a maximum firing rate of, say, 100 or 200 hertz. So there's like a 10 to the 7 or 10 to the power 8 difference in the speed. It's also incredibly efficient. So our brains operate generally at only about 10 watts of power, whereas your computer, your laptop is probably typically using at least 100 watts of power when it's doing some, fairly significant computations. So what we're interested in is building circuits that learn and process information like the brain. One thing we know also is that, probably the brains are very good at sort of recognizing patterns and correlations in data. They're much better at that than computers, actually. And so, what we want to do is start applying that ability to sort of complex systems. And the power grid is one example of an extremely complex system. I'll say real quick, too, this is kind of, I liked Marion's talk very much. Thanks, Marion. This is, in contrast to typical machine learning algorithms, we're thinking very biologically inspired. So we actually have voltage spikes, and we actually try to build circuits that have brain-like learning and training mechanisms. So the way that we're hoping to analyze and sort of observe the power grid is by simulating small sections of power grid in a real-time digital simulator. So that's shown on the right there in the figure on the slide. Basically, the power grid is incredibly complex, right? It's all around us. Everything runs on electricity. It's very widespread, and it's also both old and new. So people run really old machines and really old systems, but also there's brand new things like smart grid, modules that are communicating with the power station and saying when there needs to be more load demand or less load demand, those kinds of things. So it's a very complex network of these generators, power distribution, and then loads. And so what we'll do is take small parts of the power grid, simulate it in this on this real-time simulator, and most of the time that'll be operating normally, right? So depending on whether it's day or night or hot or cold, different loads will be requiring different amounts of power. We'll also then simulate various types of cyber attacks in that power grid, and so there's multiple different types of scenarios that you can simulate, and we will then try to train our neural network to recognize those sometimes very subtle attacks on the power grid. So the way that we are approaching this is to train the neural network using what's called evolutionary optimization. So if you can imagine what that is, it is basically building a network and then testing to see how well it works. And if it's terrible, you throw it out and you build a new network. And if that one works kind of okay, then you tweak it a little bit, and you basically it's like a genetic algorithm, right? Where you go through this process of trying to find the optimal connection. And then once we find sort of the optimal connections, we will actually use training that's much like the brain, called spike timing dependent plasticity, to finally adjust and finally tune that network to hopefully be able to recognize attacks on the power grid. So from there, if we can train the network to recognize attacks, we have a response network that would then issue a directive to say open or close switches inside the power grid to mitigate that attack or to keep it from causing a really bad result. So that's kind of an overview of what we're doing, and be happy to answer any questions.
Awesome. Thank you so much, Dr. Cantley.
Mhm.
If you have any questions, please go ahead and unmute your mic.
No questions at all?
I was about to say, I have one really quick.
You have one. Okay, good.
Yeah. You're talking about, creating a kind of like a machine brain and whatnot. And I mean, kind of growing up in the 90s and 2000s and whatnot, one of the things that I remember always hearing was, oh, we'll never create a computer that can, compete with like the human brain. So in this process, what do you think is the most difficult part of trying to do that, where you're trying to, mimic or have this kind of human brain in machinery?
Mm-hmm. Well, I mean, the human brain is like incredibly complex, right? We use a type of neuron in our system that is very much like the majority of the neurons in the brain, but actually there's hundreds of types of neurons in the brain that exhibit different behaviors, and it's incredibly complex. There's 10 trillion neurons, right? Something like that. So I think that eventually we will be able to create electronics that really behave like the brain, but it'll be a while before we understand how certain things like attention work, and at some level we do understand some of the ways that the brain is actually trained, and the ways that like babies learn and things like that. But I think we're going to have a lot more deeper understanding of that before we can really build an electronics that do it. So right now we build electronics that are biologically inspired, but they obviously aren't truly intelligent.
Thank you.
I hope that answered your question.
Yeah, definitely.
So this is Luke Hindman from Computer Science. I have a quick about your simulation data. Do you have real incidents that you use for your simulation data, or is it you're just trying to like? Do we have a really good idea of what a cyber attack on our infrastructure looks like that you can use?
Well, yeah. There's well, when we can talk more on Tuesday, but there's various types, right, of cyber attacks. I mean, there's and by the way, we're going to look at cyber attacks, but there's all kinds of faults. And if a tree falls on your power line and causes a short, that's an obvious fault. But there are other types of cyber attacks that are just really hard to detect, where someone could, hack into some of the hardware and actually change the outputs of the hardware. And what we hope to be able to do is take all kinds of different types of signals coming from that system and say, something's not right here. Like this isn't matching up, where it wouldn't look like it's out of bounds, or it wouldn't look significant to a normal observer, or to say like a digital system where like these hard rules, so to speak. But that hopefully we can sort of detect those very subtle correlations. And so, and in terms of the data, we're going to actually use a tool we're going to use a tool out of Pacific Northwest National Lab called GridStage, which does just this. So it has like 4 different cyber attack scenarios that you can simulate in an IEEE, certain IEEE bus systems that are just like standards. And then eventually we will move to more complex and actually having like a hacker try to mess with the system. So rather than pre-programmed stuff, we'll have someone at INL, that's part of that collaboration, actually work on it in real time while we try to detect what they're doing.
Very cool. Thank you.
Yeah, thanks.
Awesome. Thank you so much, Dr. Cantley. I'm going to have to cut the question short again, so sorry. But yes, please write them down. Okay, our final speaker is Dr. Gaby Dagher. So Dr. Gaby G. Dagher is an associate professor of computer science at Boise State University. He is the director of the Information Security, Privacy, and Mining Research Lab and associate director of the Idaho Election Cybersecurity Center at BSU. His work focuses on designing secure protocols and developing tools for solving real-life problems related to cybersecurity and applied cryptography, including blockchain and cryptocurrencies, cyber forensics, e-voting, and cloud computing. He's going to talk to us today about quorum-based consensus protocol for healthcare blockchain. And I'm going to go ahead really quick, stop sharing so he can share his screen and show us a little bit more in depth of, his slide and kind of point out some things for us.
All right. Hey, everyone. All right. So my presentation today is about consensus protocols. So basically, blockchain is an emerging technology that's being applied and used in many areas, including in cybersecurity, to achieve distributed access control, like audit trail management, identity management, and so on. But for blockchain technology to achieve security, it needs to be secured itself, right? And usually blockchain technology relies on a peer-to-peer network where nodes need to talk to each other in order to reach to agreement on what the next block, what are the valid transactions, and so on. So these type of agreements, we call them consensus, right? So let's start our discussion here by talking about consensus protocol. So the first thing here, let's try to answer two questions. Is achieving consensus easy? And second, is it important to achieve consensus? So the first part is about achieving consensus, whether it's easy or not. Let's take the two generals problem, where we have two generals trying to attack a city, and they want to agree on when to attack, and they have a messenger goes between both of them. The thing is, this messenger needs to go through the city, the enemy territory, and the messenger might get captured, right? So how can they agree on a certain time? So for example, an example is, well, let's assume A will initiate the discussion, send a message to B, let's attack tomorrow. And then B received the message and send the message back to A, confirmed, and A received the message from B. Is that sufficient for them to start the attack? The answer is actually no. And the reason for that is B does not know whether A has received the confirmation or not. So what A can do is A can send another message confirming that it received confirmation to B, right? And so on. But now B, when it received it, right, even if it received it, A does not know that B received it, then B had to send another confirmation, and so on and so on and so on. So theoretically, this problem is really hard. So the answer to the first question is no. Now, the second question is it important? The answer is actually obviously yes. So let's take, for example, the TCP protocol, specifically the four-way handshake protocol for terminating connections between client and server, right? Usually the way it works is you send the FIN flag and you receive FIN/acknowledgement, and then the server will send the FIN, and then the client will send the FIN/acknowledgement, which is fine, right? But the problem here is what happened if the message that was sent by the server was not received by the client? Then what do we end up with? With a half open connection, right? Because now you have two client and server and two different state of knowledge, right? So reaching consensus is really important. So the Byzantine general problem is a generalized version of that two generals problem, where we have generals try to attack, right? But the thing is, they have some malicious generals among them, but they still want to send messengers, right, to reach a consensus on a legitimate plan. So basically, this problem is how can the non-malicious generals still can reach the correct plan, right? Even though they know that there are some which they don't know who you are, but they exist in there that are malicious, right? And these malicious generals cannot get these non-malicious generals to reach a plan different than the original plan. So this is the problem, and blockchain tried to solve this problem, starting with Bitcoin, right? And there are a lot of consensus protocols proposed for that. So I'm going to just mention here two of them: proof of work and proof of stake. A proof of work, as we know, is super inefficient, right? But it's not only that; it also makes system insecure. We used to think that it's you need to have 51% control of the nodes in order for you to to break the system, but actually then you realize, no, 33% is good enough. But then we even realize that only with 25% control, you can break the system. So this system is really, while it's very energy inefficient, it's also not secure. Proof of stake proposed in Ethereum, like is definitely energy efficient. There's not a lot of computation that's required with proof of work. However, it's also insecure. There are many attacks against it. One of it is nothing at stake, where, you know, like basically miners, they don't have incentives to not mine forks in the system. So basically, nothing at stake encourages forks, which leads to double spending and so on, which means, you know, like validate the integrity of the system. So you don't want definitely these type of things. And both of these consensus protocols also enable the rich to get richer. So if you have more computational power, you know, then you will have more chances to be the leader, you know, to determine the next block and so on and so on. So what we did here is we look at this problem and we designed the protocol. So this is a paper by two of my PhD students. We published it last year. So this paper basically proposes a scalable consensus protocol specifically for healthcare that is also secure. So the main four properties in this system is fork resistance, right? Like if you, you know, like if you're building a healthcare system based on blockchain, you don't want your, I don't know, MRI, you know, like record to show up on the blockchain, but tomorrow it disappears because, you know, that your fork is not valid anymore, right? So you want it to be fork resistance. Also, you want it to be robust, in the sense that, you know, like even if some nodes went down, you still have, the system will keep going until a certain threshold. The system also, we achieve scalability in the system. So the system is scalable, even though the number of, you know, users increases in the system. And also we achieve liveness, where basically if somebody submitted, like in some cases, you know, with cryptocurrency, if you submit transaction, it shows up tomorrow, maybe it's not a big deal, right? But if you are in a healthcare system, you want to submit your transaction and you want it to show up as soon as possible, so you can maybe get your, you know, medication from the pharmacy based on the, you know, what is in the blockchain. If it doesn't show up on the blockchain until tomorrow, then that delays the whole thing. So we achieve all that. And the process is actually as follows. After transactions are sent to the peer-to-peer network, then the quorum is determined and they consolidate their transactions to form a block. And then they collectively sign the block and propagate it to all peers in the network. And then the network together, they vote on whether to accept or not to accept the block. So these charts, basically, one of them, this is about robustness. We show that if we have a threshold of 13, which means if we have 13 out of 15 non-malicious nodes in the network, right, we achieve very high robustness. So basically, even if they have multiple controls of the blocks in a row, then they will not be able to have pretty much any control later on. We also show that our algorithm is fair because, you know, like if you're choosing quorum selectively, you want to make sure that you don't choose the same people over and over again. And this basically shows that our algorithm is better than randomness, which is pretty good, right? But it's still not as good as the average, which is the ultimate goal. So this is the first step in the system. So the next step is, because this is only the consensus protocol, our next step is how we design the blocks and the transaction for healthcare system. And maybe the third one will be how to design lightweight client to connect to this node. Thank you.
Awesome. Thank you so much, Dr. Dagher. Unfortunately, we're running really short on time, so I think we will just have everybody who would like to ask Dr. Dagher a question, please jump into his breakout room.